singers. I then take that to the orchestra. And so I consequently know something about this particular interpretation that the orchestra, even if they've played it 969 times, they might not necessarily know, because
Right.
I am the advocate. I'm the go-between between the singers and the orchestra. If I'm playing a piece of music that doesn't have that dynamic, it is much easier, I think, sometimes for conductors sort of to fall into a path of least resistance. And let's just go. I mean, the orchestra's playing together with this, the Tchaikovsky or Beethoven symphony. Let's just go with that.
Yeah.
And the thing that I learned, and that has been valuable to me, is that the same idea of my knowing something that the orchestra doesn't know, and what I mean by that doesn't mean I'm smarter. I mean, I'm talking about this dynamic of I know what the singers need because I've worked with them. All right? I apply that as well as to my own interpretation of anything I do. I pretend that I'm the singer, okay? I pretend that my little brain up here is the singer that needs it to be at a certain tempo, or needs this amount of breath, and needs all this kind of stuff. I know that. The orchestra doesn't know that. And so I can encourage the orchestra to do the same kinds of things that I do in an operatic situation where it's absolutely necessary. I might come to a tempo where a soprano, let's say, or a tenor, doesn't matter what the voice type is doing a coloratura passage. And the only way they can sing it, because of the technical demands and the weight of their voice vis-a-vis, the passage, and you know this, Brooke, as a singer, you have to do certain coloratura passages at this tempo. It's the only one that's going to work for you, all right? And so I have to insist on that with the orchestra. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's what it has to be.
That's absolutely true.
But you know what? I can also apply that to all the literature, and so that's the way I found a degree of personalizing my own approach to even standard great pieces of music. That's how I do it. It's just to sort of really recognize that this inner interpretation of mine is my joy and responsibility to try to share that with an orchestra in a way that will allow it to realize that vision. So it doesn't matter whether I'm working with the Roanoke Symphony Orchestra, the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, or anything in between, or every orchestra. I'm not trying to turn them into the world's greatest orchestra. I'm certainly not the world's greatest conductor. But what I am trying to do is realize my interpretation of a particular piece. And I have to say, every time I conduct here in Roanoke and the Roanoke Symphony, I'm able to achieve that because these wonderful players in the Roanoke Symphony have always been more than willing and gone out of their way, I think, to again, I don't want to use the word follow, but to collaborate with me, collaborate with my idea of how one should interpret a piece. And that is a great, great joy. I remember doing a few years ago, I did Brahms' Third Symphony with the Roanoke Symphony. And from an interpretive standpoint, I was so thrilled because it would have been the exact same way if I'd been doing it with the Vienna Philharmonic. I wouldn't have changed anything. And
yeah.
So that's the joy, and I'm talking too long about it. But I love talking about these subtleties of conducting and interpretation and stuff like that. And
one of the compliments that I always get from singers who come through Opera Roanoke is just what a singer's conductor you are, and I think that's really something to be admired because you have a way of making the singer feel very comfortable in expressing their own artistry, and that's not always the case. So I think you're open to, you of course have your own interpretation and know what you want, but at the same time you're very much open to having the singer express what they want as well. And I think in compromising and collaborating in that is just one of the things that I always hear about you. And so I always feel very good about that.
I appreciate that. I mean, collaborating with singers and trying to help them. I feel like, being a conductor, particularly in opera, is very much like being a manager of a baseball team. A manager of a
crying in baseball.
Well, and exactly. And there are, and no baseball manager hits a home run or steals a base.
Right.
And so no conductor, particularly in opera, you know, my favorite thing about conducting opera is that I am in an orchestra pit and people can hardly see me. And so I can focus entirely on my job, which is to help the singers, to lead the singers, and to help the orchestra. And so I'm not worried at all about what, the back of my head, or whether the orchestra, whether the audience sees me. It's great. So I can really concentrate on my job, which is making music and collaborating.
Yeah. So this is going to be probably the hardest question of the bunch, and that is to say, and so don't think about it too much. Do you have a favorite piece? It can be opera or orchestral or both.
Well, there's so many. I mean, obviously, good Lord. I would have to say that if I had to, pick one piece of music to take with me to my grave, it might be Mahler's Ninth Symphony. And close behind that would be Das Lied von der Erde of Mahler. I'm a Mahler guy. I know that does not separate me from the crowd. But there are other, there are an infinite number of great pieces. I would say that if I had to choose an opera, it might be The Marriage of Figaro. It might be, it's just so great. But I also love Elektra so much. I love Parsifal. I love Tristan. I love Tosca. I love La Boheme.
We'll stop there on that question.
Too difficult, and that doesn't even touch the. What's very, very interesting is that much of the music that I would say is my very, very top favorite desert island pieces, I have yet to conduct and may never conduct. I've never conducted Mahler's Ninth Symphony. It's hard to imagine that I might get many chances at that. I've never conducted the Missa Solemnis of Beethoven. And so these pieces are so great and so wonderful that I have to experience them from a study standpoint, from really studying these pieces and getting to know them in that way, which is part of the conducting process. So
yeah.
Anyway,
this is a side question. Have you ever, has there ever been a piece in your life? Obviously, most of your pieces are successful by the end, but have you ever started with a piece and thought, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done?
I think the last movement of Das Lied von der Erde is the hardest thing to conduct. And Mahler himself said that he didn't know how it would be conducted. Both the Ninth Symphony and Das Lied von der Erde, Mahler never heard, and his assistant Bruno Walter conducted the premieres of both of these pieces. But when Mahler was writing, he said, "I don't even know how one would conduct the last movement of Das Lied von der Erde." And yes, there are other pieces. But the great thing about conducting, it's like poetry. I tell people that poetry requires taking time. You will eventually, if you let it saturate, you will find the right way to turn a phrase. You might decide you don't need a rhyme. All the poetical considerations, I think, require time. The same with conducting. The prologue of Ariadne of Naxos is a 40-minute accompanied recitative. An accompanied recitative is hard, and it takes great preparation. But I've often felt that it just takes it takes time to work out. As a conductor, do your responsibility from a technical standpoint. Rely on your own musicality. Rely on the musicality of others. Don't take shortcuts. The technical component of conducting, to me, is a sacred thing, because without it, I can't have the kind of freedom, and my musicians can't have the kind of freedom we have that we need to make really great music. So I approach the technical aspect of conducting incredibly seriously, and so I will labor in my own mind as I'm preparing for the right way, in my view, to allow for the greatest amount of freedom. And so there are some incredibly technically difficult pieces that once you study them, I feel as though they unlock themselves. So my answer is, when people say, what's the hardest piece to conduct? To me, it's not so much about hardest pieces to conduct as it is hardest pieces to prepare. There
Yeah.
are some pieces that are incredibly difficult to prepare, but once you've prepared, preparation is everything, you know?
Well, and you know, that's one of the reasons that I love working with you, is because you're just one of the most prepared people. And you know, sometimes artists aren't always as prepared as we want them to be, but so I really appreciate that about you. And so my final question is, you're not a native of Roanoke, but you've lived in Roanoke for some time, and I just want to know what drew you to this area, and what your favorite thing about living in Roanoke is.
I adore Roanoke. I adore Southwest Virginia. My father is from Wythe County. I was born and raised in Wythe County, in Max Meadows, near Wytheville specifically, and I have relatives that live here. Years and years ago, 1999, I think it was, I was in Florence, Italy. My wife, Elizabeth, was singing a production there, and I got a phone call from my agent saying, "Would you like to conduct Lucia in Roanoke, Virginia?" I said, "They don't have an opera company in Roanoke, Virginia." I would know this because I used to come up here and visit my family all the time. Lo and behold, we did. That's how I got first interested and first involved with the opera company. And then years later, Elizabeth and I we were living in Chicago. And we were saying, where can we move? We wanted to get out of the city. I said, well, I've always loved the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I've always loved my ties to the Roanoke area. We built a home, and here we are. So what I would say, that what I love most about Roanoke and the surrounding areas, I do love the people here. I really do. Some of the world's greatest human beings live right here in our neck of the woods.
Well, thank you.
But it's that neck of the woods that is also so attractive. I mean, as you can see, I live in the woods on the side of a mountain.
And I'm enjoying hearing all the bird songs
I
behind you.
I apologize for the birds.
You have some very active birds.
Yeah, exactly. But I try to take as much advantage of the outdoors and the natural beauty that we have here as I can. So I spend a lot of time hiking. I go hiking. I've been hiking almost every day for the last couple of months, and but I really do adore it. I love this area. I wouldn't choose to live anywhere else.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear. We don't want you to live anywhere else. Well, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much, Stephen, for talking to us and to our audience. And I know that they really appreciate it. And every time I talk to you, I learn a little something more that I didn't know before. So thanks so much.
Likewise, Brooke, I've learned so much about you, and your leadership of our company is just really refreshing and solid and beautiful. I know everyone associated with the company is grateful for you. You're doing a wonderful job, and my collaboration with you is I love it. I do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we'll see you soon, Stephen. Bye.
Bye.